Greetings, hello, hey, hi, guten Tag. So today I'd like to talk about the gender debate. This has been an ongoing issue, an ongoing contentious issue, controversial matter of debate, pretty much just generally in the Western world, I believe, as of late, particularly here in Canada as of Bill C-16, which went into law last year. Which basically says that it is against our human rights code to not refer to a transgender or gender fluid person by their preferred pronoun. So that has been a very contentious issue, largely circling around the views of Jordan Peterson. So what I'd like to do is sort of disentangle those views as well as Peterson's position and sort of gain a better understanding of the whole situation and sort of work through it myself. I mean, I haven't fully worked through it already. I have these broad ideas at which I'm going to try and, go through now. So I thought I'd start with a bit of a story, a bit of a funny story from my past. So when I was in preschool, I have this memory of myself. I'd asked to go to the washroom, and the washroom was downstairs. It was sort of like a large bungalow kind of building. Like, it had this one big upper room space in which, all the little kids do all their little, whatever the hell the little kids do. And then you have to go downstairs to get to the washrooms. So I put my hand up, was welcome to go to the washroom, and I went down there, and I noticed that once I got down there in front of the two doors, the boys and the girls right beside each other, both the doors were open. And I just remember, looking at the two signs in the open doors, and they're, looking around and seeing if anyone was around, and I just had this sensation that I wanted to see what was different in the boys' room. So I went in there, however old you are in preschool, 4 years old, I don't know how I remember this, well, we're gonna get to how I remember this. So I go in there, and of course, I see some stalls, but I also see urinals, and I'd never seen a urinal before, so I'm like, what the hell is this? So they have little stools that you can climb up on, so I'm climbing up the stool, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. So, I go so far as to, pull my pants down and try to go to the bathroom. So I'm sitting there trying to, pee, excuse me, vulgarity, well, to the extent that peeing is vulgar. So I pull my pants down, and I'm sitting there, can you imagine trying to pee in a urinal being a female? So I'm trying to do it, and then all of a sudden the janitor comes in. She just starts screaming at me. I don't even know what she was saying. Well, more or less, she was saying, pull your pants up and get the hell out of there. So I think, she had a really adverse reaction. I think that's why I remember it so well. So suffice to say, I use the female washroom for the rest of my life. But what's really funny about that, or what's that sort of, what that gender's behavior is indicative of, her such a, aggressive reaction, I think is indicative of the, aggressiveness to which, or rather, the sort of aggression we can sometimes display when we feel that our, beliefs about how things should be are violated. So yeah, that's my story. So let's break into it. So I think what we should start this with is, first off, we've got males and females. Biological sex. That's right. So we're going to put a little B there for biological sex. So I think one really important thing that we obviously need to distinguish is that biology counter, I don't know if anyone watched that, I think it was on the agenda, Jordan Peterson and some, weird, historian of science professor who claimed that biological sex doesn't exist, it's just a construct. If you believe that, I can't help you. Maybe you should keep watching, maybe I don't know what you should do. But for all intents and purposes, we assume that there's a biological male, there is a biological female. And what studies reveal about biological males and females is not only do they differ obviously in their physiology, their actual being, their sort of structure, they have their own structural differences, they also have slightly different brains. So our brains are different. So we have a female brain and we have a male brain, and I'll leave it to you to research all the different, the structures that are different, as well as how those structures manifest in reality in terms of things that men tend to be better at on average than women, and things women tend to be better at than men on average, the sort of different traits. So right from the outset then, we see that there is a divide between men and women that is substantively substantively grounded in a biological reality. Okay, so there's that. However, so when we move into transgenderism, what we see here, or like what I've read, it's a relatively new area of scientific research, but there was an article in Scientific American that reviewed a study that showed essentially that transgender people, so someone who is a biological male but believes that they're a female, those people, and similarly for males who believe that, or females who believe that they're males, I hate going the back and forth like that, so transgender people, let's just say, they typically have brains that resemble more the, the gender or the sex to which they believe they in fact are. So, that's really interesting, right? So that kind of breaks down the gender and sex thing as sort of like a two-way street, right? So, on the one hand, we've got our, let's say, this is disconnected, this little thing here. So we've got our bodies, right? We've got our bodies, and we've got our brains. And what we see is that, like, by virtue of the transgender phenomenon, is that these things don't always align. So you can have a brain that is more male than female, and yet be a biological female. And then, so it ensues the whole fucking cultural drama around it. But nonetheless, so that's really important. That is really important. So transgender people, right? So their argument, of course, which makes sense with what we've just said, is that, so we've got trans, so we'll put a 1T, trans 1. Born this way, right? That's their argument, or the general argument for the side of, being transgender, accepting transgenderism, etc. It's that I was born this way, and in fact, yes, science supports that claim. That is a true statement. You, in fact, have a male or female brain and an unmatching, unfortunately, like lady or male parts, which is probably feels pretty bad. I can't imagine what that's like. Woo! The one thing I like sometimes at what religious people say is, we've all got our crosses to bear, and I'm like, you know what? I'll give you that, because that's pretty true. Okay, so, but then on the other side, we've also got the phenomenon that really interests me, is that we've got the gender fluid. So, we'll say, F2, the other position. So, let's fluid 2. And that is, gender fluid essentially believes that their gender is changing over time, right? So changing, essentially what that means is that's a direct contradiction to transgenderism, right? Because what they're saying is that this is a negation symbol, for those of you not familiar with, negation symbols, not born that way, but become that way through social conditioning, etc., or whatever. So obviously this is deeply problematic, right? Because here you have, two groups of different kinds of identities, but which group themselves together, right? So you have the LGBTQ and whatever else they've attached onto there. And they say, we're one coherent social happening, and all of our views are aligned, etc., etc. We all support each other. But this was the point, I believe, of Jordan Peterson in his initial, adverse reaction, or one of his many points, I should say, was that, okay, so let's preface this with standard logic. In reality, we can't have a position that is A and plus a position that is not A. Why? Because that's a contradiction. It's either A or it's not A, right? So, from what I understand, science is on that side, right? So, that leaves us to disentangle this gender fluidity position, right? Because, what does that then mean? Because, okay, let's work this out. Okay, so the transgender matter is, literally settled. Anyone who's still, crying about it, shut up. Read Scientific American. Your feelings don't matter. One argument that It's a really sassy argument from Ben Shapiro. There's this, he's doing some kind of talk there, and at the end of the talk, there is a student has a question. She's, like, social justice warrior type, and she's essentially asking, like, how he can deny the rights of transgender people, whatever. And Shapiro's argument to her is, why can't you identify as 60? Because it's not a physical reality, right? That's his argument, is that what you're saying is, like, absurd. You can't identify, like, it's not true. It's illogical. It doesn't make sense. You can't, just like I can't identify as, like, an African-American woman, you can't identify as 60, and you can't identify as the opposite sex. But I think that, no, what we see in terms of the transgender is, yeah, because a singular person isn't just, one physical reality. That's what we determined, right? Is that one transgender person, or any given person, really is sort of two realities. There's their physical bodily reality and also their brain reality, right? And those things, as proved by science, are not always necessarily aligned. Okay, so I just like get that out of the way, because why the hell not? So, but then what the point is here is that we're left with this gender fluidity position. And these are the people who are like, call me Z, call me Zer, don't call me he or she, because my identity is constantly changing, right? So one day I wake up and I feel like I'm a man, the next day I wake up and I feel like I'm a female, etc. So I'm about to get not charitable, so just, like, brace yourself. So I've spent probably too much time watching videos on YouTube of gender fluid people talking about how they feel, talking about what it means to be gender fluid, just talking about their general experience. And so they typically say things like, this isn't something I want, but then in the next sentence they'll say that this is something they want, that they want to be this way one day and they want to be another way another day, and etc. So I want to pose a hypothesis, more or less, from what I've analyzed from observing these people, and also to some degree being a little bit, like, gender non-conforming, maybe to some degree myself. So that is to say that I could completely be wrong in everything I'm about to say, but I think that it's relatively reasoned, and we're gonna, subject it to the court of public opinion, so we're gonna find out. So my hypothesis about the gender fluid people is more or less that, like, referring back to the female and male brain, right? So by virtue of the female and male brain, we see these sort of patterns, or these sort of ways in which men and women act and express themselves. And over time, those on average, because they're, like, averages of the ways in which men and women express themselves, these become stereotypes of the ways in which females and males typically are. And, since not everyone is automatically the same, those can sometimes be oppressive, right? So it might be a stereotype that all females should typically or should have, or rather, let's put it this way. The stereotype is that females typically have long hair, wear dresses, are caring, have children, and what have you, right? So that's a stereotype. And the problem about stereotypes is that it's one thing to say that on average a group does, like, such an X, Y, and Z, but it's another thing from that stereotype to then say, okay, you belong to that group, and they typically do X, Y, and Z, so therefore you have to do X, Y, and Z, right? So that's problematic, right? Because it doesn't account for individual variation, right? So just because you belong to a group, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to or should act in all the same ways that group acts. So what I'm getting at here is that my hypothesis about gender fluid is that this is not a reaction to sex, right? This is a reaction to stereotypes about what females typically do, what males typically do, and not wanting to conform to either of those things, not wanting to be associated with either or, but wanting to be, a unique individual that is on a spectrum. That's the spectrum. That's the thing they always say in their videos and talking about. They're like, gender is a spectrum. And, to some degree you're right, because I don't even think it's gender. I think humans are on a spectrum. We exhibit all different kinds of variations in behavior and interests, desires, whatever. So I think that's the true thing about them. I mean, I could be wrong. Let's wait till, like, more science comes out on specifically gender fluid people, but for now this is my tentative hypothesis from observing them, is that it's just a negative reaction to stereotypes. It's saying, I don't want to be confined by this, I don't want to present in this way, you know, I don't want to wear a dress, I don't want to, maybe you're a man, I don't want to wear pants. I even watched a video of a guy who liked to wear, you know, like fancy women's shoes, and you know, all the power to you, whatever, it doesn't matter. So, but my point here is that what we see, or what I see, is that people are just reacting to these stereotypes. It's this sort of cultural movement in which some ex-body people are trying to rebel and say, I want to be free to be whatever I want to be, and I don't want to be associated with the negative things associated with he, and I don't want to be associated with the negative things associated with her, and so therefore I will be ze, zer, zim, whatever. So that's my hypothesis, more or less. And my conclusion is stop, more or less. So before you, like, relax, calm down, I'm gonna explain what I mean. So if we take it to be the case, so on our baseline assumption, or premise one, that these people are just reacting negatively to stereotypes and saying we don't want to be confined by stereotypes, we want to just be free to be human, whatever. Okay, so we'll take that to be the case. So then my reaction to that is that, okay, that's fine, but you're not actually helping the larger sort of position that you're really coming from. So, like, what I think the original position is, like I said, is that we want to be free to be who we are, we don't want to be confined by these stereotypes. So what I think they're actually doing by, you know, saying I'm fluid and I change from day to day and I'm not associated with either gender, is that on the days that they feel male and on the days that they feel female, all they're doing is switching between stereotypes, right? You're going from, okay, I'm gonna wear a dress today, I'm gonna wear high heels tomorrow, today I'm gonna dress, you know, in flat shoes and more masculine. All you're doing is this sort of like ricocheting between stereotypes rather than just authentically being whatever it is you want to be. So I think in that way you're sort of reinforcing those stereotypes. What you're doing, from my perspective, is saying that yes, this is male, this is female, and I will rotate between them while not saying that I'm either or. But like I said, it's not helpful. Like you're not doing anything that sort of helps the cause, because what your true cause is that we want to be free to just be. We just want to be humans. Like, yes, I may be a female, but I don't want to do stereotypical female things. So from my perspective, what the answer is to just, you know, authentically be. So like, I am, of course, you know, biased by my own subjective perspective. So for me, the only time that I'm gonna wear a dress is if I'm, you know, like trying to please my boyfriend. Like, I don't give a shit about wearing a dress. Over my dead body, am I gonna wear a dress to school? I don't think so. It's like, top 10 things, never gonna happen. That. But I don't need to call myself, like, I don't need to say on those days that I don't need to say generally that I'm male or that I'm male aligned or anything like that. And I've even been told that by people. I've been told, you know, your interests are very male, you have merely male-like qualities. So for me, all you're saying when you say that to me is you're saying, oh, you're assertive, you're opinionated, you're in like a stereotypically male-dominated or stereotypically only male-interested discipline, etc., therefore you're male. And from my perspective, no, like, I'm just a human who doesn't conform to stereotypes. I'm, you know, my own person, that I see these different ways that people behave, and I will cherry pick from each of these groups what I like, what works for me, who I am, etc., and that's that. And then, for me, that's how you break those stereotypes. Right? That's how you progressively move forward. It's by just authentically being, and in your authentic being, breaking those stereotypes and behaving as you authentically are. So for me, it's just counterintuitive. You're just ruining the whole well, you're not ruining anything, but you're not helping the situation. But then again, you know, everybody's free. It's a free world, baby. Do whatever the hell you want to do. If you want somebody to call you Zer, then you can ask that. But in no way do I think you're required for me to call you that. Because what you're doing is you've enacted this sort of ideology in which there's all of this fluidity, and because of that fluidity, you need special new names for things. I disagree, because all he, she is biology. Like, are you a biological male or are you a biological female? I'm a biological female, but I like male things, or stereotypically male things. Do I need to be called he because of that? Because I like to wear, you know, buttoned up plaid shirts and whatever? No, I don't. I don't need that because I have a vagina. So, I am a she. And it's that simple. It doesn't need to be oppressive. The only reason it's oppressive is because of the stereotypes attached to it. So do your part to break down the stereotypes, and before you know it, it's not going to be oppressive anymore. So, yeah. That's really all I have to say about that. I just thought I'd put it out there. So if you disagree, if you think that I'm an error somehow, please present your argument below. And yeah, more than open to opinions. Like I said, this is my perspective on the matter from what I've observed, and I completely acknowledge that my position could be an error somehow. Maybe there's science that says something different. Let's wait for it to come out and see. But tentatively, simply just respect yourself and other people. So another part of that is that the onus here isn't just on, so this, I know I said I was wrapping up the video there, it sounded like it, but I just want to point one more thing in here. So part of breaking down the stereotypes, the onus for breaking down those stereotypes doesn't just fall upon the people who claim to be transgender or gender fluid or whatever. It also falls on the other people in society and in the culture. And I think that's part of why those people, like the gender fluid people, for example, are putting this pressure on these new pronouns, is because they're trying to say, you also need to do your part in breaking down these stereotypes. And to an extent, I believe that's true, but I don't believe that's true in the sense that I need to call you Z's or whatever, or recognize this gender fluidity as some like concrete thing or whatever. I think all that means is just that if you see a dude in a dress, then well, like, why does it matter? Who cares? Like, if you're 10, it's funny. It's like laugh because it deviates from a norm. And, you know, norms guide our lives, whatever. And it's funny to see something deviates from it. But when, you know, you're older, you're like 20 years old, 50 years old, whatever. It's like, who gives a damn? We're all like primates, highly advanced primates. Who gives a shit? It does not matter. Or if you see like a female that looks like a male, it's so irrelevant. It does not matter. It only matters when you're trying to like infringe on someone else's language or on someone else's behavior. It's not hard to just, you know, be who you are and let other people be. Let it be. In the immortal words of the Beatles, just, you know, like fucking leave it alone, for the love of God. That's all I have to say.